Welcome to this evening's From Crisis to Transformation in Schools. This is a speaker series brought to you by Sky Schools. And this is really just a space for educators to speak. We wanted to create an opportunity to really hear from our leaders in education about how we can transform this current crisis that we're in into a tremendous opportunity for change for ourselves, for our students, and for our communities. Today we have with us Dr. William Blake. He's the Director of Social Emotional Learning from the District of Columbia Public Schools. He's going to speak to us about social emotional learning and how we can use social emotional learning as a tool to bridge the gap between students who don't have all the opportunities. Most importantly, he also loves to roller skate. He's an Eagle Scout. He lives in a house full of women with his 2 daughters and his wife. And he's a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. So today we're going to hear about how we can use social emotional learning to uplift and create opportunity for all students, especially for students of color. So welcome, Dr. Blake.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this speaker series. I just want to acknowledge that we are in the most unprecedented time in history in the world right now, not only in the USA, but across this entire world. And I just want to give yourselves a round of applause because we are still breathing, we are still navigating, and we are still finding a way of how to navigate through this crisis, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's a racial relations pandemic. We are finding our way to navigate through this. So I want to start by honoring each of you that are on the call today, and thanking the Sky Schools for inviting me. And today, I just want to have a conversation. I have some prompts where I'm going to be engaging throughout this talk. But today, we just want to have a conversation around what is social emotional learning. We are going to ground ourselves in SEL. So that is the abbreviation for social emotional learning. We're going to unpack some of our SEL competencies. And we're going to also just have a discussion around how can we control our realm of influence in navigating through this unprecedented crisis that the world is experiencing. But before we get started, I just want to engage in what I call like a quick SEL opener. And this is going to allow us to engage in the chat, all right? So I want you all to think of, I'm going to ask you, how are you feeling? But do not respond in the chat yet. I want you to respond using a weather metaphor. All right. So for an example, how are you feeling today? How was your day? You could say something, you know what? I am cloudy with a mist of summer rain, or I'm going through a blizzard right now. Using a weather metaphor, please share how are you currently feeling today, or how was your day today? Using a weather metaphor, and you could drop that inside of the chat. Sunny with no chance of meatballs, okay? Yep, just drop that in the chat. I'll drop mine in the chat as well. Singing in the rain. Oh, I am in the sky, hazy skies. Oh, there's a cold front, turbulent but sunny, cool skies following. Okay. Gotcha. I said it's a blizzard with the hailstorm looming. And I'll share why I said that. Foggy but lifting above the clouds. Yeah. Sunny, warm weather, slightly cloudy, light breeze. You all are giving me some great energy. When I look out the window, it's very dark outside, so it's not because it's nightfall. And your weather metaphors are giving me some some good imagery right now. Also, sunny high winds. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you all for checking in around that. And that is just to get a pulse of the room. Whenever we are talking about social emotional learning, and I'm going to unpack this competency a little bit more, but one of our core competencies is self-awareness. So it's always good, no matter if you are starting a meeting or if you're starting a work day or if you're ending your work day, it's just to reflect on how are you feeling, what energy, what vibes are you bringing into the space, and just by looking at a lot of the weather metaphors that I see in the chat, a lot of you all are bringing positive energy into the space, sunny weathers, just a little bit of clouds I see, a little bit of haziness, but overall it's a lot of sunny days. So you all are having some good days. So I said that I have, it's a blizzard with the hailstorm coming on. And just by working in the school system and planning reopening schools, there is a lot of unknown. And I just feel like the unknown is a constant blizzard of snow or a constant blizzard of hail coming down each day for us to either try to dodge or try to catch and try to figure out how are we going to move forward to make sure that we are reopening schools in a positive and a safe environment for our students. So, but all in all, I am feeling good and I'm happy to be here today. So, social emotional learning, and how can we use social emotional learning to navigate through this crisis that we are in? First, I think it's very important for us to ground ourselves in the definition of SEL and what is social emotional learning. And I'm grounding our definition using the CASEL definition, using the CASEL framework. And CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. And their website is casel.org. One thing I am excited about CASEL, within these last 6 to 7 months, they have updated their definition of social emotional learning. And they have added the component of grounding social emotional learning with equity. So now, according to CASEL, they have a holistic definition of social emotional learning grounded in equity. And I just want to read it just for a second. So according to CASEL, it says that SEL advances educational equity and excellence through authentic school, family, and community partnerships to establish learning environments and experiences that features trusting and collaborative relationships, rigorous and meaningful curriculum and instruction, and ongoing evaluation. SEL can help address various forms of inequity and empower young people and adults to co-create thriving schools and contribute to safe, healthy, and just communities. One thing that I appreciate about that definition is that SEL is not only for students, but it is also for the adults as well. And when I speak about my work and talk about what I do in DC Public Schools, we are very, very intentional around building the capacity of our adults so that they are aware of the 5 core competencies that are a part of the SEL framework. And today, I want to be very nuanced and be very intentional to talk about the 5 core competencies that are a part of the SEL framework. And these 5 core competencies was also adapted by CASEL as well. Just to call them out, it's self-awareness. And we kind of dibbled and dabbled with our self-awareness competency by doing our SEL opener. Self-management, social and cultural awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. For the purpose of today, how does these 5 core competencies, how will these assist us to navigate through and transform through the pandemics that we are experiencing. And you notice I said pandemics because there are two pandemics going on right now. There is a health pandemic and there is the pandemic around race relations in America. And it is important for us to call that out and speak about it. And for us to reflect on how can we use social emotional learning to like navigate and transform schools through those two pandemics. So starting with the first competency, I want to talk about self-awareness. As adults, before I go into it, please drop into the chat, why do you think self-awareness is important? So before I unpack it and before I give you the theory and the practice behind it, I want to hear from you. Why do you think being aware and being self-aware of your emotions, of your feelings, why do you feel that it's important as an adult? Just drop a one-liner in the chat around that. Why do you believe self-awareness is important as an adult? And you could drop your answers in the chat. Promote acceptance of self and others. Yep. I'm more at peace when I'm self-aware. Absolutely. Without knowing what's real, what's actually going on, there's no way to adjust or understand what others are receiving. Wow, powerful. In order to be authentic, to know when to act and when to rest. Because it gives you a brief detachment and allows you to get less stuck. You all are putting some powerful, powerful, powerful words in here. Absolutely, thank you. So in our line of work and what I do for our school system, I kind of want to unpack what we mean when we say self-aware. So for our adults and for our students, we want our adults and our students to develop an appreciation of one's accurate self-identity, including one's cultural, linguistic, and personal asset. In Washington, D.C., we are in a diverse community. Our city, for those of you all that might not be aware of our city is broken up into 4 distinct quadrants. The Northeast quadrant, Northwest quadrant, Southeast, and Southwest quadrant. And each quadrant, it is very, very diverse. So when it is important for us to be very intentional for our students to ensure that they are developing an appreciation of the differences that they bring in their learning experiences, in their learning spaces, and to appreciate the linguistic and the cultural and personal assets that their peers and that their adult and that their teachers and their administrators might bring into that space as well. The reason why we believe that is important, because by doing so, we are developing a community where our scholars have a sense of empathy. Because if you are able to connect and understand other cultural differences, if you are able to connect and understand other linguistical differences, you can develop a sense of empathy to understand and appreciate what that person brings to the community. So it is very, very important for us to be very intentional to develop an appreciation of our self-identity, and including our cultural and linguistic and personal assets. Second, when we talk about self-awareness, we want to make sure that not only our adults are being mindful of this, but we are teaching our students how to identify bias and how to identify bias and identify your own prejudice that you bring towards not only people of your own community, but the bias and the prejudice that you bring in the space of people who might look different than you as well. It is very important to call that out because all of us have biases. All of us bring implicit and or explicit biases into our space. But if we are able to be aware and to acknowledge the biases that we bring in the room with people that might sound different than us or that might look different than us, we are able to be more mindful of how we communicate and how we interact with that person or with that peer. So when we talk about self-awareness, you must be aware of the biases that you bring in the room. Not only if it's in a school community, or rather it's in your larger social community as well. Because due to your upbringing, due to your social environments, you are implicitly and explicitly taught different biases around different groups of people. And you might not always know that you are bringing those thoughts and those feelings into the room. But if you are able to acknowledge that, and if you have an appreciation of the cultural and the linguistical differences in the room, you are able to accept those differences that you see amongst your different subgroups. And the last thing around self-awareness, we want to be sure that our adults and that our students are able to understand one's experiences, thoughts, and emotions, and values, and how they impact one's behavior. For an example, so as a Black man, it is important for me. It is important for my students. It is important for my peers around me to understand what are some of the emotions and the thoughts that and experiences that I experience daily as a Black man in society. And the way that you can learn those experiences is just by having conversation and just by having daily interactions with the people that you might engage with. So one thing that we are intentional about in our school district is the use of restorative practices. And by using restorative practices, we are using like the circle theory, where you are gathering in a circle and you are just sharing your life experiences. You are sharing your thoughts. You are sharing your emotions. And we, in our school district, we are currently doing this in different affinity spaces. So in the wake of the George Floyd killings, in the wake of the global pandemic, in the wake of the race relation pandemic, we have created different affinity groups within our school district. So where we have groups of our African Americans in an affinity group. We have groups of our Caucasian colleagues in an affinity group. We have groups of our Native Islanders and Asian Pacific folks in an affinity group. And with these affinity groups, they are able to connect and share their own lived experiences amongst each other. But the best thing that I appreciate about our agency is that we bring different affinity groups together. So we bring our African American affinity group together with our Caucasian affinity group. And in that space, we are able to really understand each other's experiences, understand each other's differences, and understand the thoughts and the emotions that they bring us to the room. And sometimes that is very, very hard work. That is very hard work. But in order to get through that, you must be very, very in tune into your self-awareness competency on the SEL framework. And I believe by doing that, you are able to disrupt different type of social norms that people might have learned within their upbringings, where you are able to appreciate the other the differences that people bring into different spaces. So self-awareness, definitely. We must be self-aware in everything that we do. The next competency, and this is a competency that I thrive in, and that I love, and that I appreciate. And that competency is relationship building. Relationship building. It is very important. And what we do within our framework, that we teach our adults and our students these three things around relationship skills. The first one, communicate clearly and effectively. It is very, very important that we learn how to communicate with each other. We learn how to communicate with our peers. We learn how to communicate with people who might not look like us or sound like us. So we are teaching our students and our adults, how do you communicate clearly and effectively with each other? Another piece is learning how to negotiate conflict. Learn how to negotiate conflict. When you think about this crisis that we are in right now, you're thinking about school transformations, people are bringing a lot of anxiety. People are bringing a lot of angst. People are bringing a lot of emotions into the room. And quite naturally, as humans, that's when conflict happens. But as adults, how do we teach our students how to negotiate conflict? And even as adults, how do we manage and balance that conflict amongst ourselves as well? And that is the anchor in relationship skills. If you are able to like negotiate and get through and fight through conflict that you have with someone, that you are coming out on the other side stronger and connected with that person. So when we're talking about relationship skills, we definitely want to make sure that our adults and our students are communicating clearly and effectively, but also learning how to negotiate conflict. And that's something that people are often timid to speak about. Um, as adults, as people, as humans, we are going to get into conflict with one another. But it's all about how do we get through and get over that conflict. And that's the use of words, getting in a restorative circle, using a restorative practice to help like build and strengthen those bonds. The next competency is self-management. Self-management. I want to pose another question in the chat right now. On the scale from 1 to 10, 1 being that I don't have that much control, to 10 being I have a lot of control, right? So on a scale of 1 through 10, how would you rate yourself on managing your emotions when you are in an uncomfortable space? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself on managing your emotions when you are in an uncomfortable space? Yeah. Okay. I see some 7s and some 8s. Okay. 7.5s. Okay. Yep. Awesome. 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 See some more 8s, some 9s. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Let me see what else I see over there. Acceptance of emotions is important. Yep. Got it. So I see a lot of 7.5s and a lot of 8.5s. It is very, very, very important as adults that we learn how to like manage our emotions. And I believe this competency is a very important competency that help us like transform and navigate and get through these 2 pandemics. And when we talk about self-management, right, we are talking about these things. The ability to demonstrate how to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in all social contexts. And also how to motivate oneself and set personal and academic goals for success. Let me go back to that first one. The ability to demonstrate, to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in all social contexts. The climate of America right now, it is very, very tense. We have our global pandemic going on. We have election season going on. We have a political fight going on. We have race relations going on. So it's very, very hard at times to like manage your emotions and to have self-control of your emotions and thoughts. And if I could be vulnerable, when we talk about social emotional learning, we're always want to reflect on you and talk about you in the local media and control. So for me as a Black man in society, at times it is very hard to manage my own emotions. Definitely when I see the killings of Black men at the hands of police officers taking place on TV, when I see leadership talk about different subgroups of people in a derogatory way, it's very hard for me at times to control my emotions. And I have to be very cognizant when I am in a professional space or if I'm in a space around my professional colleagues, I really have to like control my thoughts and control my emotions and control my language, as opposed if I'm by myself in my home, in the comfort of my own home. So it is very important, because if we are not able to manage our emotions in all social contexts, in the world of social media where like everything is recorded, things could be interpreted in a negative light. So we have to be mindful of who are the people we have in the room. We have to be mindful of who is our audience, and we just really have to be mindful and think, control our emotions, and think about before we release. And one thing that I appreciate about the Sky School organization is they really focus on like the breathing techniques, right? And the breathing technique is a way how, if you are like fed up or you have steam coming out your ears, take a step back, take a deep breath, inhale, exhale, and then respond, and then engage. So that is a way of how we can like really like manage our emotions and like regulate our thoughts, regulate our behaviors in a social context. The next competency, responsible decision making. As young people and even as adults, I think this is very, very important. And I think this is important to help us continue to navigate and transform schools through these pandemics that we are going through. And when I'm talking about responsible decision making, I am talking about how to identify and solve problems in a way that respects and considers the well-being of oneself and others. As an educator, we are always, well, I can speak for me, I am always attacking a problem, or I'm always unpacking a problem and thinking about like, how can I solve this problem in the best interest for students? In the terms of social emotional learning and talking about this competency, it's very important for us on this call and very important for us as adults to think about how can we identify and unpack a problem that will be in the best interest, not only for me, but be in the best interest for my peers and my colleagues and my social community. So what do I mean by that? Let's start with the global health pandemic, right? The problem is there is an airborne pandemic going on where people are catching this airborne disease. How can we like create a solution to that problem where we are decreasing the amount of people getting ill with that disease? Simple thing, put on a mask, right? So if we are in a social context or we are in a social settings, the solution to that is to wear a mask. If you are feeling sick, if you are going to sneeze or have a cold, stay home. That's a solution to that problem. So thinking about any problem that we might have in a social context, we must be able to unpack that problem in a responsible way. But to think about a solution that is in the best interest of yourself, but also think of a solution that is also in the best interest of your social context and your peer context as well. And the last competency, and I say this competency for last, is social and cultural awareness. In the climate that we are in right now, it is very, very, very important for us to be socially and culturally aware of not only of our surroundings, but to be socially and culturally aware of our environments, and be socially and culturally aware of the different communities that that we engage in on a daily basis. So in the chat, I want you to, it's a yes or no question, right? So I'm going to ask you, are you aware of someone else's cultural experience? So for me as a Black man, I will say yes. I'm either aware of how a white male feels in society, or I am aware of how a white female might feel in society. So for another group that is different from you, just say yes or no if you are culturally aware of that subgroup's lived experiences in society. Just simple yes or no. Yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Okay. Gotcha. I see a few yeses in the chat. I hope so. Thank you for that transparency. Insufficient awareness. Okay. Thank you for the vulnerability right there. I greatly appreciate that. Yep. And when we're talking about social emotional learning, like we have to be at times like vulnerable. We be very authentic and just speak your truth. Because by speaking your truth, you are able to like navigate and transform different experiences. So for those of you all that answered, thank you all for that. Yep. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. I've done a lot of listening, but there's no way that I can really know. Absolutely. 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 So thank you all for for that transparency. So when I talk about social and cultural awareness, these are the 2 points I wanted to talk about. The ability to establish and maintain healthy interactions and relationships across diverse communities. And second, the ability to demonstrate and take the perspective of, I'm sorry, the, the second point is to demonstrate an ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others, including those of differing backgrounds and ethnicities. On October 22nd, 2020, I believe this is the competency that is going to get us through. This is the competency that is going to allow us to come together just as a nation, as a community, to truly transform schools, but not only to transform schools, to transform communities as well. If we are able to maintain healthy relationships across diverse communities, that is a step forward to really understanding and gaining a sense of empathy of other subgroups' lived experiences. One thing that I try to do, not only in my professional role, but in my social role as well, is to insert myself into spaces that I don't normally insert myself in. For an example, if I could talk about the social scene, right? So as an African American man, the context that I got this, I did this as a classroom, as a school assignment one day where I was taking a class on race in America, and the assignment was to insert yourself in a space that you don't normally go to in the social scene. So, like as an African American man, I have a certain like social things that I go through to with my friends, but I never kind of went to like a Irish pub or like an Irish bar on my own without my friends. So I did that one time as a classroom assignment. And let me tell you, I felt so uncomfortable. I was the only person that looked like me in this space. Although we were in a social setting with food and drinks and watching TV, I had to become comfortable just to say hello to someone that looked different from me. And like they were looking at me like, wow, what are you doing here? And I was looking like them like, why am I here? But by taking the initiative just to say hello, just to grab a drink with someone that looks different than me, and we engaged in conversations. And ever since that classroom assignment, I found myself doing that often, where I am going to different ethnicity restaurants, such as like there are a lot of like African restaurants in this area. I've been to um, uh, a Afghan restaurant before, and just interacting with that community, it's very, very different. So I want to encourage you to like interact and to expose yourself into different subgroups, into different communities where you might not do on a regular basis. And I'm gonna be honest, like for me, at times, the initial response, like I get a lot of like big eyes. I get a lot of like, oh my gosh, what is this person doing here? But once people get to know me and understand, and we get to have a conversation, you will find out that we are all humans. We all bring different lived experiences into spaces, and you have a different appreciation of one another. And the last point I want to make around that piece is the ability that teaches you how to empathize. Empathy is the word of the day in 2020. we must have empathy for not only people who have been affected by COVID-19. We must have have empathy for people that have been affected or have experienced different like racial profiling stereotypes in America. We must have empathy for just people, just for like people who are just experiencing different things on a different day. And by doing so, like you are really able like to connect with that person, connect with a different subgroup, and to have an understanding like what it like how it might feel like to navigate through their shoes through the course of a day and things of that nature. So I went through a deep dive of the 5 core competencies of SEL, and I hope that I was able to make some connections, in some of your lived experiences of how you could use these competencies, not only to like transform schools, but to also transform communities as well. And I believe if we focus on these 5 core competencies on a daily basis and be very intentional, that's the thing. We have to be very intentional. Be intentional about being self-aware. Be intentional around managing your emotions. Be intentional around making responsible decision making. Be intentional around social and cultural awareness and being and adapt to your learning environments, your social environments, and things of that nature. And if you are intentional around that piece, I believe that we will not only transform schools, but we will also transform our communities and our society as well. And with that, I want to share that is the bulk of my talk, but I do want to engage right now, and just like in the Q&A, if any questions that you all might have around like the like how do you do this work, or what like what might sound, what wonderings or questions that you all might have around using SEL to like transform the spaces that you all are in. So I would like to use this time just for a Q&A piece. Rather, you could jump in the chat or you could take yourself off mute and we could have just a conversation around like, how do I use these SEL practices to help change the world?
Thank you for sharing there. It's very, very nice to hear. I'm wondering how it translates. They seem very sort of general,
yeah,
and abstract. And I'm wondering, in your experience, how you make them more very specific so that so people can really engage with them in a way that relates to their own lives. I'd be interested to hear some examples of that.
Yeah, that is a great question, and I appreciate you lifting that question up. And what I would share, so the thing that I do, the way that I engage with people of how it relates. If you have heard me throughout this presentation, I have started several sentence starters saying like, as a Black man. By starting the conversation off, or starting the engagement off as a Black man, I am creating the space for the audience to think about, okay, this is the lived experiences that this Black man is going through. And by me starting off with that simple strategy, you are able to make some connections of your lived experiences, even as a white male. And we might say, you know what? We might have some of the same lived experiences. So it is very, very important to be very authentic, but keep it to the local and immediate. And when I say keep it to the local and immediate, that's by sharing, starting it off with like that's in the starter. As a Black man, as a Black father, as a Black educator, this is my experience. And by leading it off with that, I am able to create the space for the audience to interpret and to reflect on my experience, but to also make connections like, oh my gosh, I had this same experience as well. And I've come from a different subgroup and things of that nature. So you must always keep it with the local and immediate by sharing who you are, what you are, so that the audience can make a connection to that. Another question I saw, how do you encourage students to go into places where they normally would not go? That is also a great question. Just to give you also a background around me, I'm a former middle school principal and I'm a former high school principal as well. And that social experience that I shared with you all, I did that social experience when I was getting my one of my advanced degrees, and at the time I was on the high school level. And I came back to my high school like that very next week, and I just had a conversation with my students. Like I said to myself, "Have you ever been somewhere where you were the only person that looked like you or sound like you, or have you ever been somewhere where people are different?" And everyone has said no. So I immediately made an assignment. And one thing about the power of being an educator and the power of being a teacher, if you make it an assignment, and if you make it where it's things where they have to look for, things that they have to do, and things of that nature, it'll actually make it more engaging for them, and they will want to do it. So I would just encourage you, if you are an educator, if you are in the school space, consider making it an assignment. And now that a lot of us are in this virtual learning, in this virtual space, it is a great social experience to do so. And let's see how they react and take it on. Another question I see is, where can I get research-based curriculum to teach SEL skills? I'm always going to refer you back to CASEL. If you go to casel.org, I'm going to drop that in the chat. Casel.org has a lot of resources, a lot of literature, a lot of information where you have SEL curriculum, where you can get that information. What activities do you do with students to increase their self-awareness? That's a great question. So before I respond, I also want to, the casel.org website has a lot of activities around that piece. And what I do specifically, I believe in restorative practices. So I am trained in I am trained in being a circle facilitator. And the way that I build student self-awareness skills is circling up, getting in a circle, having different question prompts, having different restorative prompts, and we are just going back and forth talking about each other's lived experiences and things of that nature. So I use restorative practices to really engage students in self-awareness.
Can I jump in with a question?
Oh, absolutely.
You talked about the affinity groups at the school and how you bring together different affinity groups. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how you do that successfully. And some background for me is that in my school, where I'm studying, we had some significant anti-Black racism, and our whole school was divided, and it took quite a while to even get students, Black students, back into the classroom feeling safe and comfortable. So I'd love to hear what worked for you in bringing different affinity groups together.
So one thing that I learned about affinity groups is that you must have a structure, a structural foundation to it. And the structure foundation that we use for ours, many people in our school district, we are trained in the Courageous Conversations framework. And within that framework, they have what you call the Courageous Conversations compass. And that compass have like 4 big quadrants in it. And those quadrants are, what do you believe? How do you feel? What action will you take? And what do you think about this? So within our affinity groups, all of our question prompts are led off with one of those sentence starters from those quadrants. And by doing so, our audience, our participants are able to be very, very reflective and to think about the different prompts within that structure. So one thing that has really, really helped us and really, really helped me is using that framework. And I really recommend you having some kind of structure to your affinity group, where you have a question a grounding question that's going to lead into the group, and you have specific question starters that people can reflect and think about to expand on that question. Another one I see, with all the racial mixing taking place right now, Many more subgroups are created with specific needs and concerns. How do you encourage these mixed, all levels of mixing, some not apparent kids into the conversation? Yeah, great question. So one thing that I appreciate that we have done in our district is that although we have started several affinity groups at the district office level, we are very intentional of bringing different affinity groups together. So if you're going to use this structure in the school level, where you have an affinity group of your African American students, or you have an affinity group of your Asian students, just don't have those groups in isolation. Create spaces to bring those two groups together. And it's going to be up to the adult. The adult is the one who is going to set the tone. The adult is the one who is going to set the structure. The adult is the one that is going to set the norms of bringing these groups together. And by doing so, you will be amazed at the depth of conversation, at the depth of engagement that the students will bring into the room. Because like I said, even as adults at times, there are very, very few of us that insert ourselves in different circles, in different environments. And you will find yourself, when you do that, at the end of the day, we are all humans. We are all human beings, and we all have some of the same human type of thinking that we bring into the space. We are just, the only thing that is different amongst us is the social settings that we had our upbringings in. So once we be able to do that and tear down that wall, life is amazing. That's what I always say. Yeah. So great questions, you all. Let me be very, very, let me acknowledge this. Although this work might sound easy, although this work might sound simple, it is not. It is not. It's going to take for the person. The person, you must have a certain self-awareness of yourself. You must understand your own biases that you bring into the room before you are able to engage other audiences, especially students, around the social emotional learning. So I would say the hard work is to do the hard work, right? Once again, the hard work is to do the hard work. Once you focus on your own heart, once you focus on your own self-identity, once you focus on your own self-awareness and your own self-management, you are able to create the space to help others focus on their hard work as well. So the hard work to this is to really focus on your hard work, and then you can create the space for everyone to do that as well. And I will leave with that on today, and I will pass it back to our Sky Schools representatives.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blake. I think you've taken some very abstract concepts and presented them in a way that is more tangible to us. And I love how you've left it with the hard work is the hard work. If we don't do our own work, we really can't do anything for our children. So to wrap us up, I'm going to invite Steer, one of our amazing teachers from DC, to lead us in a little bit of guided breath work and a small meditation.
Beautiful. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dr. Blake. Once again, I do believe that the work that you're doing is so important, and to be able to have someone as strongly skilled as yourself and knowledgeable to be able to share with all of us is a blessing. So thank you. I definitely got a lot for myself out of that. And I love the fact that the hard work is the hard work. I wrote that down. I have you quoted. Hopefully I can use that myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. So, we'll just do a short breathing technique, right? And so as Dr. Blake was mentioning, the breathing techniques are very powerful for being able to get to that place of self-awareness for ourselves, right? When we're able to take a moment to reflect on ourselves, when we're able to get a moment to slow down the world a bit, is when we're able to function and produce at our best, right? Whether it be with any of the competencies that Dr. Blake mentioned, whether it be with the relationships, our own self-regulation, our own self-management. It all starts with us, right? And the emotions that we experience throughout the day can be really managed through the breath. And that's the power of the breath. And we can go through a nice breathing technique right now, okay? So it's very simple. All you're gonna do is you're going to take a deep breath in through your nose, all right? So you're gonna take a deep breath in through the nose. And then you're going to act as if you're blowing out of a small straw in your mouth, right? So you're gonna exhale, blowing out through that small straw, through a small space in your mouth. Now, when you exhale, you're gonna let all of the air out of the lungs, all right? So a full exhale, seeing if you can even breathe out for at least 10 seconds. You can challenge yourself, all right? So again, you're gonna take deep breaths in through your nose. You can do it with me. And slowly breathe out through a small space in the mouth. Completely exhaling. And we can close the eyes, and we're just gonna do a few more of these breaths on our own. You can go at your own pace or you can follow along. We're just taking a deep breath in through the nose, filling the lungs, and long, slow exhale through the mouth. And once all the air is out of the lungs, you can continue for another 3 breaths on your own. Just deep inhales, even longer exhales. And when you finish the last breath, just keep the eyes closed. Relax the breathing. And just take notice to what may be happening in the mind and the body. The body is beginning to calm down. The mind is still. And just keeping your awareness on the breath. Just noticing the inhale and noticing the out breath. Not giving too much effort. Just taking notice to the breath, whether it's cool or hot, whether the breath is shallow or heavy. Just notice the air moving in and out through the nose. And we could take a deep breath in through the nose and breathe out through the mouth. And another deep breath in through the nose. And slowly breathe out through the mouth. And taking your own time, at your own pace. You can slowly start to become aware of your body and surroundings. And when you feel ready, you can gently begin to open the eyes. How's everyone? Good. So this breath is called straw breath. And straw breath is very powerful with being able to give us a sense of awareness, a new sense of relaxation, maybe focus. And you can just notice for yourself, what is the state of your mind right now, right? Do you feel calm and relaxed? How many people feel calm and relaxed? Yes? Or maybe a little more energized. The beautiful thing about straw breath is that you can do this anytime, anywhere, any place. Right? Our breath has the power and the ability to give us that place of present moment focus, of present moment peace, of calmness. And when we're able to regulate our breath and utilize the breath in this way, then we're also able to better manage our emotions, better manage our production, better manage our relationships, right? And so it's a very nice and beautiful way to couple it with all of the social emotional learning that we do. So if there is anything else, Susan, you can take it away.
I think we're good. Thank you very much, Steer. Anybody who would like to join us next week, we have Stephen Struhl from the New York City Department of Education. And next week we'll be live at 4 p.m. Eastern. So again, thank you, Mr. Blake. Thank you, Steer. And we hope to see you all next week.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Blake.
Thank you all.
Really beautiful.
It was great to be.